relationship that is always prevalent in most of the world today, especially the non-white world, where they're fighting for their liberation. He says there are executioners and there are victims. The executioners are self-imposed. The victims begin to fight and agitate for their liberation. They use all type of means to get their liberation. The revolutionary philosopher Frantz Fanon says that what happens is that the victim begins to agitate. He uses all types of means against his executioner in fighting for a position of equality. After he tries a number of means and they do not work, he then begins to imitate the means by which his executioner hacks him down. That is usually through force and violence. He says, and then they begin to use it against them, breaking the one taboo that they've never been able to break, hitting back against their executioners, so that you ought not to be upset. If we are violent, the United States taught us very well how to be violent.
4 days of rioting, looting, and arson rocked the city of Detroit in the worst outbreak of urban racial violence this year. Entire blocks of homes become infernos. At least 36 are killed, more than 2,000 injured, and damage topped the $500 million mark. Governor Romney declares a state of emergency, requests federal troops and 5,000 paratroopers reinforce the National Guard, state and city police. The city's industry and business are severely affected, and a tight curfew is ordered in the Motor Center. A besieged city of guerrilla warfare. Sniper groups use day and night hit-and-run tactics before tanks move in to curb their window and rooftop barrage. Wreckage is everywhere. Civil rights leaders make a joint condemnation of the violence and call for an end to the rioting. President Johnson, using firm words, urges the nation's citizens to support the maintenance of law and order.
I know that the vast majority of Negroes and whites are shocked and are outraged by them. Pillage, looting, murder, and arson have nothing to do with civil rights. They are criminal conduct. Your president calls upon all of our people in all of our cities to join in a determined program to maintain law and order, to condemn and to combat lawlessness in all of its forms, and firmly to show by word and by deed that riots, looting, and public disorder will just not be tolerated.
When they take care of the reasons, not only will they eliminate this one, but all others that will come about.
I don't think it's over. I think it lasts until people understand what's going on. I know a lot of people, see. I know a lot of friends, but I know it's going to be tonight, it's going to be tomorrow night, and it's going to be until people straighten this out. I know when it first happened.
When black people began to rebel, and you call it riots, we understand that those are not riots, those are rebellions. People are rebelling because of conditions and not because of individuals. No individual creates a rebellion. It's created out of the conditions. And those rebellions will continue. And it's not a long, hot summer. That's white journalistic sensationalism. No such thing as a long, hot summer. I know some places around that, snow won't even touch the ground.
Black power is a consequence of the white backlash. Riots are consequences of the white backlash rather than a cause from it.
If they're trying to present themselves as a democratic nation, as a free nation, trying to get Africans under their wing, and Africans in America are under revolt, and they're crushing them, it will cause too many problems. But J. Edgar Hoover was not a fool. He understood his job. He had to crush this movement. That's why Co-IntelPro was not only instituted, was also quiet, because this one could not get out because it was aimed really just at us.
He was prepared to try to destroy anything he saw as disruptive to the social order of things. that he saw, in the early days, the mob as, the image of the G-men against the mob and so forth. And then later in terms of counterintelligence against foreign agents. And now in the 60s, something that he didn't understand, the civil rights movement disrupting the social order of things, you use the same kind of tactics that you use against the mob and the people, foreign agents, as to citizens of the United States who were trying to get, their civil rights and their civil liberties, because they were all threats to the social order. And therefore COINTELPRO came into being, and he thought he had basically God on his side.
Black power means dignity. It means we're going to walk side by side with you, or through you. We're going to be with dignity and integrity. We don't want any more than you have, and we're not going to accept any less than you have.
We will define black power. He will listen and recognize it. That's all. That's all.
We are now moving from a mere civil rights movement into a movement to gain political power to help deliver on the promises of civil rights. And the combination of the two words, black and power, was a little bit too much for white America to handle. What you have is, with the Black Power movement, is an avowed, consciously perpetrated statement that is political, that says we want something more than simply the civil rights kinds of articulated demands. We want to talk about real power. We want to talk about international issues. We want to link all of this up. We're talking about political power, economic power, the internationalization of the movement.
It is time for an honest look at the problem of order in the United States. Dissent is a necessary ingredient of change. But in a system of government that provides for peaceful change, there is no cause that justifies resort to violence. Let us recognize that the first civil right of every American is to be free from domestic violence. So I pledge to you, we shall have order in the United States.
We were engaged in clearly a war of survival, a war for self-determination, a war for economic freedom, a war for cultural freedom, to be able to learn things of our culture, to regain our historical identity.
We have seen the terrible results of violence in this country. It would be intolerable if a handful of violent people, and that is what it is, just a handful, could harden us against needed change. We must give notice to this violent few. There are millions of decent Americans who are willing to sacrifice for change, but they want to do it without being threatened, and they want to do it peacefully. They are the non-violent majority, black and white, who are for change without violence. These are the people whose voice I want to be.
Whether or not violence is going to be used is not a question for the black community. It's a question for white America. Because white America is the one who's used violence. For 400 years, we have been the recipients of violence. We have never lynched. We have never shot. We've never burnt a church. We've never beaten people. We've never taken them to jail. That is the question for white America. The real question is, can she civilize herself before we get ready to civilize her?
So this particular time in Chicago, I'm going down 55th on Prairie, and I see the helicopter. I get out the car and I'm looking, and some other people were looking too. And I look down and I see the cops. They were all burly white cops. This is like in the ghetto area, and they own this young brother who's on the ground. And I noticed some other people around, but it's hard even to recall all that because my mind began to really. You know, it was like the whole thing changed. I saw Vietnam, I saw Bong San, Play Cool, Khantoum, all of these places I had been at, Bamba Tui, July,
coochie or whatever. And they all began to like metamorphosize almost in my mind. And I heard the cop talk in terms